August 22, 2015. A Cessna 180 carrying 2 hunters departs from an unknown location, bound for Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. At approximately 8:20 p.m., it flies low over the coastline when the plane makes a sudden climb. Seconds later,
I heard this giant klwomp, and I know what that sound is.
A crash devastated by fire.
And there was a lot of explosions, a lot of gun ammo or something in there.
A grieving community.
Man, that's too bad.
What caused a plane to go down on a routine flight in good weather, just miles from its home airstrip?
Big question is what happened.
Alaska is twice the size of Texas, yet less than 20% is accessible by road.
Air travel here in Alaska, it's more of a necessity. It's a way of life.
In the summer, there's an average of 1 air accident every other day.
The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged with investigating transportation accidents. We're the detectives of the aviation world. We determine probable cause and then go one step further and make recommendations to keep that accident from happening again.
Anchorage, Alaska, August 22, 2015. The NTSB receives a call from Alaska State Troopers about an accident near the small town of Kisilov.
We got the call shortly after 8:30. It's 9:30 right now. A Cessna 180 hit a tree line along a bluff, and a post-crash fire ensued. 2 people on board, 2 fatalities. And that's about all we know at this point. It is a sad, sad time. Somebody just lost family members. The plan right now is to go on out there and go on scene tonight. It's all just a blank slate until we get down there and kind of see what's going on with it.
The crash site is a few hours southwest of Anchorage on the Kenai Peninsula, near the town of Kisilov. Kenai is a peninsula of mountains, glaciers, and coastline, connected to the mainland by a single paved road.
The Kenai Peninsula is roughly 200 miles from Anchorage. You have to be self-sufficient in this area, kind of off the grid. You're a little bit away from the hustles and bustles of Anchorage.
Investigator Williams has launched for Kisilov, knowing relatively little.
So right now, we don't know for sure the identity of the pilot. We don't know the flight path as far as departure and destination. So there's several challenges going down to Kisilov right now. We're going to be battling the dark, and we know there was a post-crash fire. It was pretty intense. When you're dealing with fire in an accident, you lose fuel tanks, you lose fuel lines, carburetors, the whole structure of the aircraft. You know, we've got flight instruments, you've got GPSs, you've got iPads, you even have GoPros in some of them. When there's a fire, you lose all of that. With fires like this, it is extremely difficult to determine the overall cause of the accident.
A major concern is whether or not crucial evidence may have been lost in the fire.
We'll get there and we'll see what's still there and what we've got to work with here.
State troopers have already arrived on scene and secured the area for the NTSB.
How's it going, guys? Sean. It's nice to meet you.
Investigator Williams prepares to get his first look at the wreckage.
As you come through the trees, you start to catch a smell, and it's more of a burning metal, oil, and a rubber mixture. It's very distinct, especially being out here in the woods.
I talked to the passenger's wife. He said they were going ptarmigan hunting across the Cook Inlet. That's what she believed. A witness who lives just down this way, a few houses, they said they saw the aircraft One person said 5 feet. He said between 20 and 25 feet off of the beach itself, right across the bluff. And then he said it took probably like a 45 to 60 degree pitch, nose up over the trees, and then he heard the crash.
45 degrees is a significant pitch up. That could be considered an aerobatic maneuver. An aerobatic maneuver is an abrupt change in attitude or an extreme aircraft attitude that's not required for normal flight. If the witness is correct, then a Cessna 180 pitching up to a 45-degree angle could be a little on the excessive side.
The witness account raises big questions. Could the plane's steep climb have caused a mechanical failure? Did the pilot clip a tree? Did the plane break up in flight? To find out, Investigator Williams needs to locate all the major pieces of the plane. But first, the medical examiner must recover the victims.
When the medical examiner arrived, everything stopped. As important as it is for us to begin our initial on scene, what's more important is getting the victims back to their loved ones.
The NTSB has received some preliminary information about the victims.
These are two gentlemen that had some business relationships, but probably more importantly, they were friends. They were hunting partners, fishing partners. They use this airplane on a regular basis. When there's an accident like this, it reverberates through the community, and sometimes it can be a little tough.
It really hits home a little bit harder because now you're seeing them and you want to do a good job for their family. You want to make sure that they get the answers that they need.
With the victims recovered, the NTSB's investigation can continue. But the lack of daylight presents its own set of challenges.
So while we're out here, we want to see the scene as it is, right now. In case animals or anything comes through and disturbs it overnight, we want to know how it looks now. Because of the darkness, we're only able to see what we can light up with the flashlights. We need to be able to see the initial tree strikes, any ground scarring. This is really hard to do in complete darkness with just flashlights. I can see just how extensive the fire damage is. Everything from the firewall back to the beginning of the tail structure is basically gone.
Post-crash fires are very detrimental to our investigation because it destroys evidence. We're, for the most part, picking through the ashes, looking for the very same evidence, but a lot of that has been reduced to ashes, and it makes our job much, much tougher.
To rule out an in-flight breakup, Investigator Williams must try to locate the major pieces of the airplane, a single-engine Cessna 180, popular with bush pilots.
It's important for us to locate all portions of the airplane. If we cannot locate a major portion of the airplane, that could signify an in-flight breakup.
Right now I'm trying to account for all the pieces. So that's all fuselage. We've got the right wing, the left gear strut, right tire, there's the right gear.
As Investigator Williams begins his assessment of the wreckage, he notices an immediate red flag.
Wait. Hey guys, do you see the other wing? So as we first start to see the accident aircraft, one thing that stands out just right off the bat is that we're missing a wing. This may be it right here. This may be the other wing. Left wing's burned. Yeah, that's definitely the other wing, tucked underneath it. We were able to establish the nose, the tail. We still have one wing. The other wing appears to be underneath the wreckage and burned.
With all pieces of the plane accounted for, the NTSB can rule out an in-flight breakup, which means the plane was fully intact when it crashed.
Knowing that there wasn't an in-flight breakup, all that does is take that off the table. The possibilities are endless as far as what could have brought this airplane down. It could have been anything from an engine failure to structural failure, anything. It's all still on the table.
Investigator Williams needs daylight to continue working.
All right, let's get out of here so we can come back in at light and see what's going on here.
While the initial on-scene examination established that the plane didn't break up in flight, big questions remain. Why was the pilot flying so low? Could the sudden pitch up have caused a structural or engine failure? And with so much evidence lost in the fire, will the NTSB even be able to establish probable cause?
Something bad happened inside that engine.
It's been almost 12 hours since a Cessna 180 crashed near the town of Kasilof, Alaska, killing both people on board. Investigator Williams is on the ground and checks in with Regional Chief Clint Johnson.
Hey, Clint. So, heading back out there. I've arranged for the troopers to walk in with us this morning, just in case any wildlife or anything happened to come through. Did initial on scene. It's burned, that's for sure. I'm gonna get a better look at it here when the sun comes up.
Okay, sounds good. Let me know what you need.
All right, cool.
All right.
Sounds good. Bye.
We have 4 investigators here in the Alaska region of the NTSB. When our investigators are on the road, they've got a lot of moving parts to be able to take care of. This can be a tough job, and it's not for everybody. It takes a toll on you, no doubt about it.
How you guys doing?
Just wondering if you guys can walk in with us.
Do you know which way it is?
Yeah, I can walk right over there.
Investigator Williams meets with state troopers and makes his way back to the scene to get his first look at the wreckage in the daylight. The crash site is just off the road, on top of a bluff overlooking the Cook Inlet, where the plane was seen flying low. The task today is to document the scene and find evidence of how the plane went down.
Being here in the daylight, compared to last night, we were able to see the exact path that the aircraft came through the trees, where it hit and how it ended up where it is. If you come over here, that's almost a 45 up there, which is indicative of a prop strike. It came through, and as it hit that one, it took the leaves off the top of this one, and it takes you right on into the crash site.
Oh, like a 45-degree angle, roughly.
Close, yeah.
Evidence suggests the plane impacted the trees at a steep 45-degree angle. The question is, what caused this sudden drop in pitch?
One thing I needed to see today are all the cuts and breaks.
When a plane goes down in a wooded environment, it can present a lot of clues to us. We can determine if the propeller was spinning or not producing power. Tree branches can tell us a lot about the accident sequence. A branch with a clean cut can point us to a propeller turning at the time of the impact. If a propeller is not turning or turning very slowly, it's not producing enough power to completely slice through it. So you may have a partial slice.
You can see some breaks right there, fresh breaks going up, and then that tree's missing leaves and stuff. We have a few cut branches, like a few cut tops. So I believe the prop may have actually been turning. How much, I'm not sure.
Based on the partial tree breaks, the evidence suggests that the plane's sudden drop in pitch may have been due to an engine issue. But with the extensive fire damage, it's unclear whether or not the engine will reveal any useful information.
Engine case is busted. You see what I'm talking about? This rocker cover has some damage.
On planes, a rocker cover is equivalent to a cylinder head on a car. It contains the explosive movement of the engine. A broken rocker cover could cause a rapid loss of oil, which could in turn lead the engine to seize.
So the big question is if the rocker cover was damaged during flight and led to the crash, or was it damaged during the impact sequence as a result of something else?
At this point, the evidence appears to be contradictory. Tree breaks suggest the prop was turning under partial power when the plane went down. But if the rocker cover broke in flight, it's possible that the prop would not have been turning at all.
When this rocker cover was fractured and how it was fractured are major questions in the investigation.
All right, head back to the car and I'll make some phone calls.
As Investigator Williams leaves the scene, FAA Inspector Larry Hammerbeck arrives to assist in the investigation.
All right. You want to get spooled up here before we go in?
Yes.
The NTSB is the lead agency in any aviation accident, but other agencies lend their technical expertise in what's called the party system.
The NTSB party system allows us to take folks on to the investigation and become a part of the investigative team. Could be somebody from the engine manufacturer, could be somebody from the airframe manufacturer, could be an FAA investigator. But basically, they become a part of that investigative team.
I've documented the scene there during the recovery of the victims, 2 on board. The one witness that saw it said he was about 5 to 20 feet above the beach and went towards the trees, and then it impacted.
As Investigator Williams briefs the FAA, a man approaches the staging area.
Were you expecting anybody else, Larry?
No.
Quick question for you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I was the first one down here yesterday. Are you going to need anything from anybody that's seen anything? Are you good to go?
It's a witness to the crash who lives nearby.
And after I got through the whole thing, went up more. I couldn't get close to it. About 10 feet as close as I get. And then shortly after that, then the ammo started going. And there was a lot of explosions, a lot of gun ammo or something in there.
Yep.
But the flames really were intense. I felt bad I couldn't help anybody.
Yeah. It was a bad impact.
Yeah.
When an accident occurs that takes 2 members of the community, it hits home. Every accident affects an investigator. As an investigator, you have to set aside your emotions to do the investigation.
Didn't want to bother you, but
No, you're fine.
No,
If
please,
you can,
I'm glad you did.
were you the one that saw it over the beach?
no, I'm not that one. Just heard the engine gun right before it heard the head.
Did it sound like it was running smooth or any issues?
But it sounded
or-
like you revved it up right before he crashed, just throwing
Okay.
it all the way up.
Okay.
And just right behind that throttle heard the impact.
The witness heard the plane's engine rev up just before the crash, which could indicate that the engine was running normally. And the damage discovered on scene occurred after impact. But it contradicts tree brake evidence suggesting the propeller may have been turning under partial power. A wreckage layout will be the NTSB's best shot at establishing a more complete picture of what happened to the plane. In order to perform a wreckage layout, the plane must be recovered from the woods. But first, Investigator Williams must make a difficult phone call to the victim's next of kin.
Hi, my name is Sean Williams. I'm the investigator in charge with the National Transportation Safety Board. I just want to introduce myself and make sure you had my contact information and contact number for any questions, concerns that you have at all. You feel free to give me a call anytime, okay? And one question I had for you, as far as for us trying to get the airplane out of here so that we can get it to a hangar and lay it out and look at it. Do you know, did he have insurance on the aircraft? Okay, that's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, Clint. I spoke with the pilot's wife.
Okay.
No insurance.
What are the chances of getting this thing out of there?
I'm not sure.
What insurance does with the aircraft, it actually allows for the recovery and the extraction of the aircraft quicker.
Without insurance, removal of the plane becomes uncertain. But the wreckage recovery has implications beyond just this crash.
Say that we find something that's maybe a design flaw or a manufacturing flaw. At the end of the investigation, that could affect a whole series of engines or a whole line of airplanes.
If so, other planes could also be in danger. It's day 2 of the investigation into the fatal crash of a Cessna 180 near the town of Kasilof, Alaska. Lead investigator Sean Williams has just received information.
That's what I needed to know.
That could delay the wreckage from being recovered.
Hey, Clint. I spoke with the pilot's wife. No insurance. When a plane is insured, the wreckage removal is usually taken care of by the insurance company. This alleviates a lot of the stress on the family. The last thing they want to do is to have to go in and start digging through aircraft wreckage. That can be a very tough time on what's most likely one of the worst days of their life. The longer the aircraft is in the woods, the greater the chance for degradation of evidence.
We want to get the wreckage out as quickly as possible. I'm trying to facilitate that, put the family in touch with the people that can help her get that taken care of quickly.
The closest town is Kasilof, Alaska, named for the nearby Kasilof River. It's a community of less than 600 people, and word of the crash has spread rapidly.
Hey, sir. How are you?
The neighbor said that there's been a fatality plane wreck down on South Coho, and I live on South Coho, so.
Yes, sir. There was one last night.
That was a good friend of mine.
I'm sorry to hear that, sir.
Like anything else in Alaska, we're a very small community. When there's been a tragedy, when there's been an aircraft accident involving fatalities, that information spreads like wildfire.
Did you happen to see anything?
No, I heard one go over.
Here at the NTSB, there's a bit of a balancing act. The public a lot of times demands answers very quickly, a lot quicker than we can actually complete an investigation. So we try and get that information out as quick as possible.
I didn't even know that we had a plane crash.
Yes, sir. Unfortunately, last night.
Yeah. It's just too bad. Man, how many people?
2.
2? Yeah. Gus Wiley told me, he's the one that called me, and he said, yeah, he thought maybe there was 2, and he knew both of them.
Okay.
Man, that's too bad.
A lot of folks are some way connected to aviation up here. It can be a little tough, you know, running into somebody at a store or a restaurant, somebody that knew these folks that were on this airplane.
With removal of the plane uncertain, establishing probable cause becomes more difficult. The NTSB will need to gather as much information as possible about the plane's final moments, so investigator Williams seeks out an eyewitness who spoke with state troopers. The neighbor saw the plane just before it went down, so he may be able to offer crucial new information about the accident.
Sean Williams with the NTSB.
Good to meet you.
I wonder if we could talk with you about kind of what you saw.
I've been an aircraft mechanic for over 50 years. I've rebuilt them, I've torn them apart, put them back together, so I've got a lot of experience on that airplane. It was about 9 o'clock at night, and I seen an airplane coming, and I knew it was my neighbor in his Cessna 180, coming down the beach like he always does. And then he pulls up just like this on about a 45-degree angle until he's about 100 feet over the trees. And that's where he pushes the nose over and reduces the power to cruise power. Then as he proceeded off to the southeast, the engine started running rough, misfiring. And I thought, oh, this is not a good place to have a mechanical because he's low and slow.
Any engine noises out of the ordinary could be significant evidence for the investigation.
And as he kind of disappeared behind my trees here, I walked over here a ways to see if I could see the airplane, and I didn't get beyond the trees, and I heard this giant ka-whoomp. And I know what that sound is. He fell out of the sky. And that's about the most helpless feeling I've ever had in my life, because there's nothing you could do for anybody at that point.
According to this witness, the plane was flying low along the shoreline when it suddenly pitched up, then sputtered above the trees just before the nose pitched down and the plane crashed.
Thanks for taking the time to explain to us what you saw, and it's going to help out a lot in the investigation. We really appreciate it.
The witness report about the engine misfiring is a major piece of new evidence, especially since it came from such a reliable source.
The gentleman was an aviation mechanic for 50 years. So when he says the engine was sputtering or misfiring, it holds some credibility.
The new information could indicate that the broken rocker cover found earlier occurred in flight. But investigator Williams can't jump to conclusions, since he now has conflicting witness testimony. The first heard the engine rev up, indicating the plane was running at full power.
Ammo or something in there.
While the second witness heard the engine sputter, meaning it was not running properly.
Now we have to go look for the evidence to see which one is substantiated.
Fortunately for the NTSB, the plane has finally been recovered.
The friends stepped up for the family and got the wreckage out of the woods and taken to a secure facility.
With the plane finally transported from the crash site, investigator Williams returns to Kisilov, hoping to discover more evidence during the wreckage layout.
The whole point of the wreckage layout is to get the airplane in a controlled environment, look at it in great detail, maybe see things that we didn't see before. So we have two big objectives for today. We want to determine if the pilot could control the aircraft, and two, we want to get a closer look at that engine.
Investigator Williams is joined by Textron engineer Brian Weber, an expert in the Cessna 180's airframe.
Let's see what we have first and kind of go from there with it.
This 1954 model Cessna 180, with a wingspan of just under 36 feet, is constructed primarily of aluminum alloy. But the extensive damage due to the fire has made the wreckage layout more difficult.
This is where the fuselage would have been. This is where the occupants were. As you can tell, it's gone. It burned. With this part of the aircraft being missing, we're not able to piece everything together, so we have to lay it out as best we can.
With the remaining pieces in place, investigator Williams can now begin a detailed examination of the wreckage.
One of the first things we want to establish in the layout is whether or not the pilot had control authority to the different surfaces.
According to one eyewitness report, the pilot appeared to pull his aircraft up and level off just seconds before the nose pitched down dramatically and the plane crashed.
So there's an actuator in the center there that we'll be looking at.
The rudder, flaps, and ailerons are the plane's control surfaces and are connected to the cockpit by steel cables. If the pilot was unable to operate one of the control surfaces normally, it could have caused the plane to nose down just prior to the crash. The question is, were all of these essential cables intact and functioning before impact?
So this is the upper elevator cable. Here's the lower elevator cable. Okay, now if you can exercise those. Okay, so we've got continuity from these cables through that bell crank, through the push rod, to the control surface for the elevator. Okay.
Oh, yep, there we go.
Got that?
Yep, so that's pulling tight on this one. And then I'm getting tightness on this one.
Okay.
This one almost looks cut.
Yeah, you can see some shininess.
Yeah.
In order to aid in retrieving the wreckage from the woods, a lot of times the cables will be cut. We're taking a close look at all the cables. We want to see those cut marks to ensure that this was done by the recovery group.
But as the team gets a closer look at the cables, investigator Williams notices an anomaly, one that could provide a major breakthrough in the case.
That's weird.
The NTSB is conducting a wreckage layout to determine what could have caused the crash of a Cessna 180, resulting in 2 fatalities. While examining steel cables that control the plane's pitch, investigator Williams has discovered something that doesn't look right.
That's weird. We have all the rest of them cut except for this one.
This one here?
Yeah. One elevator cable stands out. Most of the other cables have a clear cut. One of the cables does not look like a clear cut, so we have to determine how that cable actually failed, if it was cut or if it broke prior to the accident.
If the cable failed in flight, it could have been catastrophic.
The elevator on the aircraft controls the pitch, the nose up and nose down tendency of the aircraft. You lose complete elevator control, your cables snap. Most likely it's going towards the ground.
If the cable broke under tension, it may have contributed to the crash, but it's not clear to the naked eye. Investigator Williams must set aside the cable as evidence to be examined later. With the performance of the plane's control surfaces in question, Investigator Williams turns his attention to the damaged engine, the Continental Motors 0470 with 6 cylinders.
This is my damaged cylinder. This was the one that we looked at in the field. You can see inside it, which is the problem. You should not be able to see inside here. This is the good cylinder. You can see how it's solid all the way around. One of the things that we're having difficulty understanding here at this phase in the warehouse here is what happened first. Did that break the cover, or did that happen during the accident sequence when it hit the trees and hit the ground?
If the damage occurred in the air, it could explain the misfiring sounds heard by one of the witnesses. But to say for sure, investigators must remove and repair the damaged cylinder, then attempt to run the engine to see if that cylinder can be ruled out as a possible factor in the crash. In order to perform this test, the engine will be shipped back to the manufacturer in Alabama.
At this point, the cause of the accident is still unknown. The engine could have something to do with it, the control cables could have something to do with it, or it could be something totally different. We have to stay objective about all the possibilities if we have any hope of trying to figure out exactly what happened.
Back in Anchorage, the NTSB can now begin a detailed analysis of the evidence they've gathered.
Hey, you got a couple minutes? Come take a look at those cables.
Sure.
Right now, the elevator cables are an open door. I want to get Clint's eyes on them and see what he thinks about them.
Since elevator cables control a plane's pitch, one snapping in flight could account for the plane's loss of control and steep angle of impact.
All the rest of them were clean cuts.
Okay.
Except for these two cables, these two ends. Everything else was clean, which he pulled up and then pushed the nose over. It could have been overload on it then, or it could have just been from the fire. But what we're not seeing fresh cut here. It's all jumbled and
it's all
angled.
Burned up. I mean,
That's the problem that we're running into. So I may have to send this in.
My suggestion would be just send it to the lab, have them take a look at it. They'll close that door for you and make sure that's a good find.
The NTSB's lab in Washington, D.C. will use high-power microscopes to determine if the cable failed due to fatigue or as a result of the impact sequence. If it broke due to fatigue, it could have caused the plane's elevator flap to fail and potentially contributed to the crash.
So it's just best just to go ahead and send it in, let them give us the official answer as far as how it failed. Right now, we're not able to rule anything out. We still have the engine to look at, so everything's still on the table right now.
Investigator Williams arrives at Continental Motors in Mobile, Alabama, to oversee testing of the engine. Joining him are Continental engine experts and mechanics. The NTSB is looking for evidence that the engine may have been the cause of the crash.
We want to discover any evidence that could either confirm or rule out the engine as a possible contributing factor to the accident. So, in terms of the on-scene investigation, the rocker cover was a big question. We'll know more as we start to get all this cleaned up, get this rocker cover off, and actually get a good look inside. So what we're finding is a whole bunch of
little pieces of metal inside this cover, coated in the oil. And basically, what it boils down to is it's pieces of the rocker cover that are in there. When we actually look at the cylinder over there, we don't see much damage on the inside. If something had broken that rocker cover from the inside out, there'd be fractures on some of these other surfaces in here, because something would actually have to push through that rocker cover to shatter it. What we're seeing between the lack of damage here and the type of damage that we're finding on the cover is that the damage to the rocker cover was impact damage as a result of the accident, not a contributing factor to the accident.
The NTSB has ruled out the broken rocker cover, but it's not the end of the road. There are still multiple factors in question, including other internal engine parts that may have failed prior to impact. So the NTSB must conduct an engine test. First, mechanics will fix any remaining impact damage on the outside of the engine. Then the team will attempt to start it up. If it doesn't run, it could mean internal damage caused the engine to fail in flight, leading to the crash, and leading the NTSB one step closer to determining probable cause.
Anytime you're trying to run an engine that's been in an accident, there's always a certain level of uncertainty. It may look good on the outside. From what you've seen on the inside, everything's great, but you're not really going to know what's going on with it until you actually start to turn that propeller.
The engine test is happening in a custom-built room called a test cell.
The test cell is an area that is enclosed and contained for doing an engine run. It's got all the equipment in there for measuring fuel pressure, oil pressure. We'll be able to know the RPMs on the engine, that sort of thing.
The engine has traveled over 4,000 miles and required the work of several different air safety professionals, all for this one test that could finally explain why this plane fell from the sky, killing the 2 people on board.
If it doesn't run, we may have the answer. But if it does run, then we just have to explore a little bit more.
Okay, here we go. Starting in 3, 2, 1.
During the test, sensors placed inside the engine collect data such as engine temperature, oil pressure, spark, and airflow.
Is that max? 2060 max? They're in the green.
All data points look normal, and the engine is running at full power. Meaning internal engine damage was not a factor in this accident.
The engine did start, so we can mark off an engine failure as a potential cause of the accident.
Even though it ran, the engine still may have contributed to the crash.
There's still a possibility for a loss of engine power. There's still the elevator cables that we're looking at.
The internal components of the engine work properly, so now the NTSB must look at all of the external reasons an engine can stop running.
Every investigation is a matter of closing doors or the process of elimination. That's why we tell the investigators to make sure that the information that they're gathering throughout that investigation is very detailed. And you may have to go back and reevaluate all that evidence to be able to come up with a probable cause.
With the engine test complete, the NTSB turns its attention to the final moments of the flight and discover the plane's last-second aerobatic maneuver could have been a major factor in this crash.
I believe that there was a loss of engine power.
Theory is great, but we need the proof.
Several weeks after a Cessna 180 crash near Kasilof, Alaska, killing both people on board, the NTSB is looking into the plane's last-second aerobatic maneuver to see if it may have contributed to the crash.
We know the airplane was flying low, pitched up about 45 degrees, leveled off, and then impacted the trees. This maneuver was definitely an extreme maneuver for this airframe. We know witnesses reported hearing sounds consistent with an engine sputtering or misfiring. There's three main causes of a loss of engine power: a lack of air to the engine, a lack of fuel to the engine, or a lack of spark. At this point, we need to focus on the fuel.
At this stage in the investigation, no stone can be left unturned, so investigator Williams looks